Yo, 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 LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and beyond. It's me, Toby, flying solo on Freeformers Unplugged on Wednesday, the 12th of March, 2025. Where is Emily? I hear you ask. Emily's not with me today. Sad times. This means I'm going to be live streaming by myself, so you get 45 minutes of me mouthing off about HR, employee experience, L&D, and everything in between. We can't have that. So I'm delighted that this week we have a very, 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 very special guest, and it is Kelly. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm so much better. The let's do this is where I thrive. I was getting to spend the day with you is fantastic.
This is a while since we've been on this horse live streaming together.
No. And I was like, I gotta check my background and make sure that I don't have a mess in the frame. It's outside of the frame. Let's be honest.
Let's break the fourth wall. Callie, how much time have you had to prepare for this live stream?
Exactly 10 minutes?
Yeah, about that. Yeah, it's a little bit last minute, Larry, but if there is one person that can make it work, it is Callie. So if you are watching, do drop us a hey in chat. Let us know that you're watching, because we need to make Callie our fair weather friend from. Well, you're from Fargo, right? I was gonna say Minneapolis. You're not from Minneapolis at all. You're out from.
Everyone thinks that I am, though. They're like, "When did you move?" And why are you in Fargo? Because I live here. I never left.
So drop a hey, say hello. We'd really love to chat to you in chat. Yeah, please do that. This week's topic is a skills-based future: why HR/L&D/people teams must rethink its own model first. And based on the very, very wishy WhatsApp brief I gave you, Callie, I will probably tee this up rather than go, hey, let's throw over to you. What do you think? So here we go. Toby's annoyed. This is how most topics are defined, by Toby being annoyed. Hey, Bob Williams in the house. Bob Williams doing awesome stuff with redundancy. And I don't... That's such an oxymoron. Hey, let's make everybody redundant. Good times. That's not what he's doing. Check out Bob and what he's doing. He's doing some really cool stuff. And he's in Lisbon. So we got a little bit of Portugal in the house. So very lovely to see you, Bob. And welcome to the live stream. So this week's topic, again, like I say, is they're generally born out of my frustration and anger of something. And here we go. I am sick and tired of HR, L&D people folks saying, we need to help our organizations become skills-based. And I feel like that is one of the most hypocritical things that department can say, because they have made seemingly zero effort to make themselves skills-based first. So I don't understand what makes them the authority to say that they're going to affect that change. Now, I might be wrong. They may have some really amazing insight that they've actually developed skills-based organizations before that I'm not aware of. But as far as I am aware, no one's actually done it before. So actually, maybe the best people to figure out how to create a skills-based organization are the people that have the skills that need to be distributed across the organization. And breathe. Callie, what do you think?
I feel like it fits well into the rant I went on yesterday about how HR has just moved from we can't use data because that would make us not people-centric to okay, I guess I kind of have to use data now. We're just making the tiniest of steps in the right direction. So 100%, you maybe have a handful of real go-getter HR industry disruptors that have an idea of how to accomplish this. But by and large, it's got to be at the department level, especially since HR is not an expert in what anyone else does. Most of the time, HR is barely an expert in HR.
Honestly, it is the baffling thing. And I took a learning industry thought leader to task on this, and I called it arrogant. And I wasn't calling them directly arrogant, but I was using definitely provocative language because I wanted a reaction. But it's kind of arrogant for HR or L&D or a people team to hello. I don't know why. I feel like they got brace. Hey. Skills-based organization, you say? I can help you out here. And no, try, like, even just as a thought experiment, try and apply it to yourself first before you then start trying to apply it to the organization. That's essentially the answer is that, right? Is what I feel is like, you are not in the best place to tell the organization to do it until you've done it yourself. You hypocrite, you arrogant hypocrite. Wow, I'm using
We're
some
really starting out in a positive place and not poking any bears at all. I mean, there's so much frustration around this because I think a lot of people go into HR with the best intentions, right? And you end up having it kind of beaten out of you just by like the inherently stiff structures within the organization. So I want to be a little Sam Eaton here and say, like, I think people really want to, but if you're going to play the game and you're going to climb the ladder, you kind of can't. And that's a real big problem in the industry.
Well, and I think that post you tagged me in, was that this morning or this evening for you, whenever, is
Dara. Shout out to Dara.
Yeah. Oh, just the most hilarious person. If you're not following Dara Bidwell already, you have to, because she just posts some funny stuff.
Yes,
and insightful stuff as well. It's not all just humorous. Like, my stuff is just humorous and there's no insight there at all. Or it's very surface level. That's where Emily comes in. Or this week, Callie.
You don't have to always be self-deprecating.
It's just my vibe. I'm hosting an event to get into the self-deprecating mood. Yeah, so I think there is the rigid structures. That's what we were talking about, right? So there was a post that was about, it was a poll, and it was, should leaders have skills and experience or empathy as the key leadership skill? And most people put empathy and kind of the human element, I suppose, as you call it. And I think one or two people put skills and experience. But in that rigid structure, right, skills and experience are measurable, they're observable, you can see them, and there's progression and all that kind of stuff. So the rigid structure there disables you from having more empathetic and human-centered leaders, because you are rewarding skills and experience. So you're almost having to kind of, you'd have to break the system to make that work. And this is what we're saying here, is right, the system in which we work in, which HR and L&D work in, but also the rest of the organization, whether it's accounting or marketing, are so flipping rigid that to become skills-based, you've got to break it down and start again. How do you do it? Well, go on. Sorry, I think you were about to say something.
No, I there's like 10 rants I could go on, and I'm going to stay on.
Go on, then pick the first one. Pick the first rant. This is Freeformers Unplugged, the home of the rant.
Well, so the thing I keep going back to the last couple of days is Peter Laughter, who you should also be following because he's a phenomenal human and has very insightful insight. I commented on one of his posts saying that I'm probably not the best person to say, like, what's my favorite leadership advice or leadership's like skill trait, whatever, because I'm inherently skeptical of authoritative figures. And he was saying, I think that's kind of your superpower as far as like leadership goes, is you don't put people on a pedestal specifically because they're in a seat, like you make them kind of earn that, is my interpretation of his much more concise thing. But I think that's part of the problem here, is we sort of kind of pick and choose rather than saying everybody has valuable insight and can have an opportunity to move the needle through that insight, which I think moving to a skill-based model, you've got to kind of level the playing field and make sure that employees who are actually doing the work are the ones who are driving the innovation, because they're the ones who have to carry those out. I mean, you and I'm sure I'm not the only one who's been given directions and gone, oh, this is stupid. Like, there's no way this is going to work. There's too many steps. It's too complicated. It's also kind of bullshit. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of that, right? And so right out of the gate, you have someone who doesn't understand what it's like to work at that particular level, making decisions on how someone's supposed to do a specific trait or task that they themselves don't understand or can't envision in a real productive manner. And that's a significant problem, and why leadership in general, whether it's in the HR department or otherwise, needs to be able to flow freely back and forth to actually move productively toward a skill-based system.
You're I just listening to you. Yeah, all of that. Like I think you move to this world where there are people that do and people that don't against this kind of thing, right? So I'm going to point my finger at not all accountants, but some accountants. And the general conversation I have with accountants are, oh, this is the way the institution has told me to do it. This is the way we do things. Yeah, I think if you gave me a couple of weeks in an accountancy firm, I'd probably like an antiquated accountancy firm. There'll be forward-thinking ones out there that are doing stuff, but I could probably offer some support and guidance on systems and processes. Emily could probably do it way better, but I think I'd give it a go. And this is where diversity of thought becomes really important, right? And diversity of experience, because then you start adding in non-traditional thinking into that model. And this is, we've talked about this at length, offline, right? In that if we look at internal communications and employer brand, they're kind of both marketeers, really. So actually, businesses generally have marketeers there as well. So you're like, okay, there is a group of people doing the same kind of stuff there. Why are they all not sat together? Although their audiences may be different and the actual function, like the functional stuff, they may be different, there is this kind of creative communication element that would benefit from each other. I'm not particularly sure a thoroughbred marketing department are going to learn too much from employer brand and internal comms, but I sure as hell know that it'll flow the other way. And then sales, recruitment, they're like brother and sister, really. They're pretty much the same thing. Customer success and business partnering, kablamo. And then L&D, benefits and compensations, product and service design. Like there are so many similarities about what HR does as a function that really, for my money, is that before HR tries to affect skills-based organizations and teams, it's like, you do it yourself, augment yourselves into those teams in your organization, and then start to figure out how you do it, because you'll be planted in there already figuring it out. But do not come to me or the rest of the organization and say, oh, by the way, I've read a book on it, and this is how you should become skills-based. Because you can sure as hell guess that's probably what's happening.
Just read a book on how to do something that's inherently complex and specific to an individual, industry, situation, relationship. Like you've gone on to another rant for me. Like leadership books, burn them all. If you have a good leadership book recommendation that actually applies outside of the very specific niche context of the writer, tell me to read it. I'll read it. But I have not found anything actually worth reading. I was trying to multitask and read Bob's comments, and I failed miserably. So I feel like we need to take a second.
That's cool. We on this live stream, we read out comments live to help us both process them. So here we go, Kelly. I'm going to read it out. So Bob Williams from Lisbon writes in. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Can I throw something in? Bob, abso-flippin'-lutely. And here you go. I'm going to catch the thing you've thrown in. What about value-based? What value do we need from the person trained to that? Hyper-relevant and agile to move with the company strategy as towards the data side. And people could say less people. And people could say less people. But if we train to value, then we know that they have the tools to deliver their goals. Yeah? There you go. Well, here's another thing. The problem is HR doesn't know what its value is. It like doesn't know its value, can't articulate its value. But other departments, we're talking about skills-based organizations here. Other departments have figured that out. So I think there is that value attribution of value and understanding that value of what you bring to the organization. And that's what it is, right? You need to be sure that the people and departments that you have are doing the right stuff. Here's a spicy take, though, that came whilst I was just listening to you and then Bob's comment, is that work's a load of bullshit anyway, really, isn't it? Because everyone is kind of doing stuff that might not actually matter. I spoke to someone the other day and it said, like, what AI does unveil is a lot of us are doing a lot of work that is actually pointless. It just shows that. And so I think that I like that value-based model because it really helps you zero in on, before you even get skills-based, it's like, well, do we even need these skills in the first place? Because what value are they bringing? What measurable change are they trying to affect? And I think, quite bluntly, and I'm not saying this is just HR and L&D, but I have a lot of experience in those departments, right? Is that you would cut a lot of headcount from that department, and most companies do, because you go, I don't see the value. Not that they don't have the value, but they don't see the value. Some of them don't add any value, but it's able to articulate that, like, and they might add loads of value. The problem is no one's ever demonstrated to me that they do it. They just say that they do lots of stuff. We live in a world where that's not really good enough, because technology is just going to make your business as people skinny as possible. So every person that remains in your organization has to be doing something, because you'll get found out pretty quickly. And I think to my other point, there's a book called Bullshit Jobs that looks at this. Is like, there was a really depressing story. I think it was a local government place in the States where a guy died and no one found it. He died in his office and they didn't find him for 2 weeks because no one at work missed him. And you're just like, well, that's brutal. Also, why were we employing him in the first place? If he can go missing for 2 weeks and no one notices, on a humanity level, that's just absolutely shocking. On a org design level, it's like, well, that makes no sense. I mean, then we go into Doge and all sorts of muddy waters about government efficiency. But let's not go down that path, because as our first US co-host of Freeformers Unplugged, we want you to have an enjoyable experience. So yeah, I kind of waffled through my response to Bob there, but what are Bob's thoughts kind of inspire you to think about?
Yeah, well, I think going back to what you said already and what you talk about a lot of, putting HR in the other departments to learn the language and absorb the skills is really important, because typically, in my experience, the good HR people wind up there because they really care about people, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe you're like me and you've seen a bunch of terrible situations and you just can't let it lie. That's how I ended up there. But it was all so obvious to me, right? Like, treat people better. If people feel valued, they create value. Go figure. But that's not the language that you can use with the C-suite or leadership, because their brain's wired differently. And so I spent a lot of time banging my head against a wall because I wasn't using the right language and communicating the value of the things that I wanted in a way that the leader cared about, because the inherent value is already there. And the connection between people feeling valued and creating great work is logical, right? Like, it just makes sense. That's how my brain works. That's not how everybody's brain works. And we need to be able to chameleon ourselves to be telling the right story. And a lot of people just don't. Most of HR people, I don't think, have developed that skill set. And it's a real problem.
Well, quite, because, well, let's put our customer hats on. You were already wearing a hat, so I'd have to actually ask you to swap a hat. But you put a customer hat on, they figured that language out. No one goes to work for a customer-facing organization and go, hey, I work here because I really love customers. In fact, I've never met anyone who goes, I really love customers. However, it's on the values of every customer-facing organization. We love our customers. I will instantly call bullshit. I've said the hat trick of bullshits now. I will call bullshit on that no one loves customers, but people love people, right? So there's that element of, because you don't have that inherent empathy and desire to please customers, you have an inherent desire to make more money and create more value. Those parts of the company have figured it out because they had to, because, well, they didn't. Well, hey, if we treat our customers better, maybe they'll spend more money with us. Yeah, ultimately, but I don't really love customers, so actually, can you just tell me how much money we're making? Whereas, like, hey, if we treat our employees better, we'll make more money. Yeah, you're probably right. Can you tell me how, correlate those two things together? No, but I can tell you we've treated them really well this year. Okay, but why? Oh, because it's our MO to treat people as the best possible, in the best possible way. Yeah, but why are you doing that? Because I'm the people department. No, you're doing it because if we treat our people better, we become more productive, they become more engaged, we make more money. Tell me that story. And it's just like this leap that we've never made. And ultimately, I say we never had to. We have had to. We just haven't. No one's ever done. Very few people have done it because. Oh, I don't know why. I don't know why, Callie. We've had another comment in from Matthew Collington. Here we go. He's had a brill example last week. He was lucky enough to be on a safari. I don't see where this is going immediately. Usually when you read the first line of a comment, you kind of usually go, I see where this is going. I had a brill time last week. I was lucky enough to be on safari. After the third drive, I was feeling HR cocky and tried to list the skills needed to be a ranger. I got to great off-road driving and ability to spot animals in the trees. I asked the ranger what he would add. He said 5 years of study and 16 years of experience. I love it. Such a good example. I mean, Matthew, I am imagining you're on holiday. Dude, if you're on holiday, take a holiday. Don't try and HR yourself in these conversations when you're on a safari. Look.
Be real. You can't turn it off either.
Well, I mean, that is very true. I was at the beach thinking of HR solutions on Sunday because I'm cool. That is great, but it's such a good example, right? Like the HR and L&D sit there and observe how all these departments work and never really lean into them at any meaningful level. So we're never going to be the best people to do that. Well, there's two solutions, right? There's several solutions, but like human-centered design makes sense. But even though then you've got to spend a lot of time and a lot of empathy, a lot of understanding about what it's like to work in that organization. But there's the co-creation. So it isn't just about the discovery about, what a ranger in this example does, but actually building whatever, if you need to build a skills-based organization as a safari company, how would you map those across? And ultimately, you've got to ask them and probably build them into the design. And it's about, and this, it comes back to, and I don't think I've ever said this before, but HR and L&D and people teams are about enablement, but that they should be about enablement, but they're not. They're about process, policy, and pushing stuff to the organization. And imagine, Matthew, if you went to that range and went, 16 years of experience and 5 years of study, give me the wheel. Watch, this is how you do a safari. Imagine if you did that. That is ultimately what HR and L&D teams are doing. You go, hey, you think you know how to run a marketing campaign? Hand over the keys, buddy. I'm about to drive your marketing campaign for you with this fantastic e-learning experience.
Okay, though. Now I'm getting a little cocky. Grew up in rural Minnesota. 15 years of competitive speaking experience. And able to hyperfixate on learning new information. Like, tell me the animals I'm going to see. I could probably do a pretty good job at being a safari leader.
That is a whole different live stream.
Give me a week. Like, I feel like, yeah, competitive. Tell me the animals. I'm okay at driving. That's fine. Clearly, you invited me to talk with no notice. Like, let's compete. Competitive safari, hosting. What did you call it?
That's interesting. Though. We go back to Bob's comment about value, though. So Matthew's, I'm going to say friend. Matthew's friend, the Ranger Joe, we'll call them. Ranger Joe says it took all this, and then Callie all of a sudden bundles along, going, "Hey, give me the wheels, kid. I'm going to start driving this safari, and let me tell you about some animals." But then it's about value. So Ranger Joe versus Ranger Callie, who offered the most value.
Oh, I'm competing against you, not him.
Oh, you're competing against me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
I think that's a really good point and really important, right? Obviously, he's going to add way more value. He's going to be able to answer some weird questions, but I'm also going to be able to answer some weird questions because that rabbit hole probably goes pretty deep.
Even though a giraffe's neck is really long, it has the same number of bones as a human neck. I think that's true.
And they wrap their neck around to sleep. It's the cutest.
This live stream's taking a weird safari-based turn. Matthew, thank you for your input. I really appreciate it.
You're like, what the hell? This was not what I was intending.
I'm hoping that's a true fact about the giraffe thing as well, because
it is.
Okay.
I'm gonna pull up pictures for you after this. It's adorable.
I used to do this thing at college and university, and then early work. Whereas if I would see something that no one knew what it was, I would just come up with what it was and tell them like it was true. And I became really good at it, which is like a pathological liar is what I became. So I stopped doing
I have actually done the same thing.
You're just like, hey, yeah. Oh, that animal over there, that's a barefaced mongoose. And it's, the oldest type of mongoose on the planet. And actually, it has 26 kidneys.
I did that on a school trip once to further this digression. And like 2 hours later, one of the kids was like, oh, it's so frustrating how smart you are. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, how you just knew that thing. And then I was like, oh yeah, I made up all of that. I know nothing about that tree.
But let's bring it back to work. I think that genuinely, like this peacocking nature of what I know and what I do happens quite a lot in the world of work, because it's like, well, you have to be seen to be adding value and doing stuff. So I'm going to say that I'm doing lots of stuff when actually, tell me how you're shortcutting it. Tell me the hacks you're doing, which means actually 8 hours of work is taking you 4 hours of work, so you can do 4 hours of housework or whatever you want to do in a day. You can tell what I do if I have any additional time. So what is I want to know these stuff, but there's this relationship between employee and employers. I'm going to tell you how I'm hacking the system because you're just going to give me more work to do. Like, I'm happy with that level of, and so this relationship to have this open, honest conversation to create a skills-based organization, the psychological safety and the relationship between employee and employer probably in most situations isn't good enough to enable that to happen. Because you're probably going to overcompensate and try and protect your job, because the first thing you'll think, Bob Williams, is if I do this, you're going to restructure us and you're going to make me redundant. And so there isn't that level of safety. Like, that's ultimately every organization is going to want to make sure it's the most efficient and optimized as possible. And in an employee's head, I think more often than not, that equals I'm going to let go or my job is at risk. And therefore, you then start doing the thing. You do almost the opposite of what you're being asked. It's like, I don't want to help you become skills-based. Why would I do that? I like my job. I've been here 20 years. No one's been there 20 years. But like, how would you get, like, can you even get around that? There's a long silence from both of us. But it's...
I want a quick clarifier on my overly confident statement about leading a safari. In my brain, we're at Disney World and I'm like on a track, and then went, that's not what he was doing.
No, he was on an actual safari.
Like, don't send me out into the wilderness with a gun and expect me to be in charge of keeping people safe. I do not have the skills for that.
Look, I've only met Callie in real life once. It was for a whole week, but I can pretty much vouch for that. I wouldn't trust Callie to do that either. No offense. Obviously.
Yeah, no, but I mean, but that's like the different wavelengths things, right? Like, people like to talk about wavelengths right now, and like in my brain, it was an entirely different set of context because I was not at the real safari, and it took me a second to catch up. And that we're doing that with our organizations all the time, right? Like, we're trying to define structures in a theoretical setting from a seat of inexperience, and expecting that we know what we're doing and can create value. Psychological safety is really, really interesting. And I think it's come a little too colloquial in the HR circles. Like, we're used to talking about it all the time and we kind of forget about it. But I actually gave my first presentation on psychological safety last week. And the really interesting thing about it was awesome because it was in a room with people who are going through 8 months of leadership training together. And so they had an element of safety coming into a conversation where I was talking about some of the things that I've experienced at different points in my life and saying, none of us are going to be perfect with this, but you have a lot of control in how you show up and interact and how you show up for other people to create the type of environment you want to work in. And there were so many women who were willing to share some really awful things. Which I think is a really valuable and important part about psychological safety. Is we think that it's like this fluffy thing, and that there's like it's something you can kind of separate, or like it's sort of a utopia of like, okay, let's get to psychological safety when we have room to focus on the fluffy stuff and, trust falls and all of that bullshit. But really, you can't get anywhere without establishing that ability to, confidently be able to say something dumb and have people be like, yeah, actually, no, I'm not going to give you a gun and have you in charge of people's safety either.
And well, Bob was just saying he loves psychological safety, and unfortunately, he's just had to dip off. So bye, Bob. See you soon. I watched some catch up because, like, I'm gonna reference Bob a little bit more. But the psychological safety, to create psychological safety, isn't like, oh, what is the thing we deliver to create psychological safety? It's the same with culture, right? It's like, oh, hey, would you like a really good psychological safety workshop? And then you'll have a really great psychological safety and psychologically safe environment at work. Doesn't work like that.
No, we give them a coffee mug.
Yeah.
I was looking for a branded mug and I don't have one in my reaching.
Mine just says you've got this, so mine's completely unbranded. But where you get to is like it has to be done by design. Like this psychological safety has to be done by design. So you need to know that if you input in this process, the inherent fears you have about engaging the process aren't going to happen. And organizations aren't designed like that. How we work with the relationship between employees and employers is not designed like that. And we don't take the time, care, and effort to design like that because we focus on pushing stuff to the organization as a HR and L&D team that we think it needs, rather than being the enablement department and enabling them to figure out what they need and create that. And I think it actually probably does a lot to, I think HR and L&D does a lot to make it an psychologically unsafe environment, really, with the policy and the pushing of content and all of this kind of stuff makes you think and feel and act that way, where it's actually, I'm not saying break the law and reinvent employment law, but what I'm saying is design it. Like the policy and the framework is there for you to design around, not just to implement you have to implement it verbatim. But like, yeah, there's numerous, and this is a whole different live stream about how particularly the HR industry interprets employment law changes and then what it delivers as a result. I think I mentioned it last week, the updates to the Equality Act and what HR is now delivering as a result. It's like, doesn't make any sense what you're doing. Doesn't make any sense. You can offer that and you can sell it or you can push it to your organization, but actually what you're doing is just doubling down the problem HR has had for a long, long time and not creating the safe environment for people to come to work. Anyway, skills-based, because we're talking about skills-based work, right? And then what you said there was about the Safari, and I just was going back in my head to a project when I was working somewhere else, and this organization would quite often spend tens of thousands of pounds of client money getting to know departments and problems. And like, it just baffled me that security at an airport, for example, tens of thousands of pounds getting to know how they do, what they do, how they think, how they feel. And I get it, that is important. But hey, what about if you actually just took some of them and brought them on that co-design process with you, rather than trying to front end all of this conversation discovery? Still do some of that, but actually have them in the room to design it makes way more sense and actually would save you a lot more money in the long run.
And get buy-in faster.
Absolutely. Then you have champions for what you do and all that kind of, like, it just makes sense. So, and this is where, look, as a lover of human-centered design, I love it, but it's just applied too tactically, not strategically, for it ever to make any sense. And so, well, that's why I now have my own company rather than working for someone else, because there isn't anybody doing it. There isn't. People say, oh, I do human-centered leadership, I do human-centered learning, I do human-centered. It's like, yes, but it's all wrapped within the same barrel of crap that makes all of that human-centered stuff that you're doing not actually be that effective, which baffles me. So I think the thing I'm getting to here is, like, creating a skills-based future is nothing about human-centered design at this stage necessarily. It's more about how do you create the system and environment to do that, which can be human-centered design is part of that, but there almost has to be this co-design collaborative approach. I mean, I think what we've got to 35 minutes in is it's going to be a pretty difficult thing to do. The recipe is human-centered design, psychological safety, plus the right environment, systems, and processes to enable that to happen. There isn't one department that can make all that happen. And so to quantify the arrogance and swagger of some thought leaders that come in and say, we can make skills-based organizations, our L&D is going to be the team that helps companies become skills-based. Hogwash. We need to do 3 separate live streams then on the right environment, the right psychological safety, and the right level of human-centered design to do that. This is a big, thorny topic, and I wasn't expecting it to get this. I thought we'd come up with the answer, to be completely honest. And I think, didn't I not say at the beginning, oh, that's the answer? But the answer is the answer is no one single person, department, or industry has the answer. And I think that's where the annoyance of this topic came from, is that there are people out there saying this is the answer. We need to help organizations. It was the phrase of this one thought leader that got me. We need to help organizations get there. I'm like, what do you know? What do you know? We all know nothing, pretty much, because AI knows it all and it's going to take it all away from us. Right, rant over. Let's talk practically. Skills-based. Where would you start? If you're going to try and make a skills-based organization skills-based, where would you start?
Can we pick an industry at least?
Let's apply it to HR, because that's the world we know and kind of love. If we were going to try and create a skills-based HR team, what would we do? And I'm going to just peel the fourth wall back here. This is what I've been doing for the past 2 weeks. So I've kind of cheated already and I have an answer. But I want to know how you do it, and I'll tell you how I've gone about it.
You have to get psychological safety people in a place where they're okay saying, what would happen if doing experiments and seeing what happens? Like, you can't do it without it. Okay, backing up. Mm-hmm. Psychology, right? I have a psych degree. I love psychology so much. But the idea that you can't replicate studies is problematic for the entire field of soft science, right? And that, I think, is something you inherently need to understand, and it's too messy for the average person to deal with, that you need to be able to do experiments with the employee population, seeing how they're responding, and making educated inductive reasoning approaches based on what you're learning along the way. Because sure, maybe something worked with your past company or something like that, but you're working in a different environment, in a different political climate, with a different set of values potentially, and without the opportunity to safely say, I wonder what would happen if, and test some of those things, you're unlikely to be able to make progress in actually becoming skills-based, because we don't give HR an opportunity to test real skills. We give them SHRM or whatever and say, here's the best case practice. Well, SHRM is shooting itself in the foot and disintegrating more and more every day, because they don't even do HR the way that HR is supposed to be done.
Wow. So experimentation is an interesting one, because I always make a joke about disrupt HR. Like, the last thing you really want to do is disrupt HR, because that could cost you a pretty penny. And so maybe there is that element of policy and legislation that sits within HR that you don't really want to disrupt or experiment with, because if it can go wrong, it can be kind of costly. Whereas if you do it with a customer, hey, maybe you lose a customer or two. No biggie. Unless you're selling.
You can still do it with a department, or especially someplace that's imploding. Like what?
Well, but no, but I agree with you. I think is like the whole notion and premise of what HR does stops you from doing that, because that is the focus, and it's like that is just one thing that it does, and really should be focusing on, you know, employee experience as a more holistic initiative. Once you get to that place, then experimentation makes loads of sense. But when you're working in silo, you know, if you have a larger HR team working within these silos, and then it's that ability, it's the ability to fail.
Right.
No one, I've never been in a job where I felt comfortable to fail, ever. That's a little bit from, there was a guy I used to work with called Greg, and he usually quite quiet and reserved, but he stood up in front of the whole company. The company was about 30 people at this point. He went, I don't think we celebrate failure. And he went on this really well formed rant about, like, this is ridiculous, it's holding us back, like we don't allow anyone to fail, you know, practically calling out how the company's run in this regard.
Yeah.
And nothing changed as a result. But he gave a really impassioned, high quality talk, because ultimately failure probably means impact on revenue, credibility, a whole number of factors, regardless if this is HR or anything else. So it's like, and then you get to the place where there was a large FMCG company that I did some work with, and they had this incubator, this employee experience incubator, essentially, that they had a little office of 30 people, and this is a company of, you know, tens of thousands of people worldwide, and they just did experiments, moved desks around. This was before the pandemic. Moved desks around, moved computers around, gave different computers, you know, changed the temperature, changed the music, there wasn't any music, all that kind of stuff. They started changing that environment to understand what effect it was having on performance in a safe space. But they could not do that anywhere in the organization. They had to incubate that in a protected environment. So to go to your point about psychology, because I'm not a psychologist, and I approach psychology with a very cynical lens, because I'm just like, just be data led, don't be psychology led. But be both. Don't let one drive you solely. But what what you need to get to is that incubator model organization wide. And this is why startups tend to have this great vibe of doing stuff. They don't have L&D teams. They probably don't have a HR team. No one's looking after it. Everyone is just getting shit done because they're all there and they haven't got time to really think about it. But they navigate the way to do the best stuff themselves. What generally happens in organization, I don't know what size it is, but if anyone has any ideas and comments, let me know, is you just spoon everything into your employees' mouths and don't allow them to design the environment and systems they work in. It's like, this is the process. This is the system. This is the way you work. This is the way you don't work. This is what you do. This is what you do. This is what you do. And you shovel it and you shovel it and you shovel it until they just go, you know what? Just shovel it in, then I will just sit here and accept it, because I am not going to break my back trying to affect change in this organization, because clearly you don't want me to. And that's a problem.
Or they do want those things and they say, I'm going to go try this somewhere else because clearly it's not going to work here. And then they end up like you and me and starting their own companies.
Every reason I've left a job ever is because of that. But not everyone comes out of the box like that either. Like, yeah, and this is the nature of designing an employee-employer relationship. Some people want that safety. There is an element of employment which is safe. And as soon as you make that feel like it's not safe, you're actively going against the very thing that they came to that organization for. So they're going to try and either hunker down and protect themselves and say, I'm going to stay here, or they're going to fly off and go somewhere else. So probably the issue here is when you get to a skills-based model, no one knows what the end result looks like. And this is where I got to in the past 2 weeks, looking at skills-based HR teams. Like, I think I figured it out. And the reason why I've struggled to articulate HR teams, if you can hear click clacking, it's just started raining. It's not me typing. Look, my hands.
I can't hear anything.
Okay, great. This mic tends to pick up lots of ASMR type stuff. But where you get to is that if you took every single role, every single person I've encountered, every person I've worked with in a HR team, and then break down those skills, like this spreadsheet I've built is just stupidly long. and I have probably spent too much time on it. No, I haven't. But I've broken it down, and you can then kind of map and go, well, who else are in an organization has these skills and is doing this stuff? And you look at it and you kind of go, there's so many similarities between what HR needs to achieve and that the rest of the organization are doing. There's also some things that HR does that are particularly unique and that can't transfer, but that requires a bit of analysis. So there's that element of it, but then you have to be able to translate it into, well, then what does that mean for the future? And have that vision already. So this is maybe the answer, right? Is like, have an answer. Doesn't necessarily have to be the right answer, but at least employees know where they're going. Right. And this is when when I talked about L&D becoming product and service design team, like that's what L&D needs to transform into for my money. People would go, yeah, I kind of get it. It makes sense. Okay, make it happen. No, I can't do that. It's too difficult. Well, actually, I think it's really straightforward. Why do you think it's difficult? It requires change and all. It's like, I'm not asking you to change what you're doing at all. Keep doing the same stuff, but just change the environment, system, and people you work with to get it done. But like, there was an element of trust there. It's like, oh, well, what does it look like? And I go, oh, we'll know when it gets there. So this is why I had to spending 2 weeks doing it, because it's like, well, that human nature is like, well, no one's ever going to move to a location they've never been to before. That said, when me and my wife bought our second house, not that we have two houses, but we sold and bought another one. We moved into a house that I'd never seen before because we needed to move pretty quick because we're on the run. No, we're not. I got a new job down south and we had to move pretty quick because I was commuting from the north to the south to go to the head office and it was becoming tiring. But there's that element that you've got to be able to craft that destination of where someone's going to make them feel safe. If you say, hey, I'm going to move you over here. Well, what's over here like? I don't know. Okay, cool. All right. So I've got to trust you to move over to that place? Nobody trusts HR, whether you like it or not. You're inherently distrustful as a HR person. Like, it just is.
I distrust HR. And
I distrust every single human being on the planet, to be completely honest.
That's funny, because I'm the opposite. I'm like, you're great, you're amazing until you tell me you're not. Unless you're in HR, then I need to figure out why you got there, and then we'll go from there.
But that is also a problem then. So you're asking, okay, so we've just identified as psychological safety as one of the key cornerstones of creating a skills-based organization, and you've actively just told me is the department that's saying that they can make this happen because L&D sits within HR, and so those two bodies inherently create a lack of psychological safety, yet they're the ones leading the initiative. Red flag, red flag. Stop. Think about what you're doing. Think about what you're saying before you leap into it. So yeah, if you're a thought leader out there talking about skills-based organizations, stop it or tell us what it is. Don't talk in these kind of arbitrary terms that are ill-defined, untested, and just what you thought of in your own living room, although practically that's what I've done. No, we're working with clients to do it. We're talking to clients and figuring it out. Callie, anything you'd like to say in closing? Because we're about to get out of here.
Yeah, well, the irony throughout all of this is kind of building up in my brain because almost every single job I've ever had didn't exist before I had it. I was the one who was like, here's the destination, figure out how to get there. Which is really fun and scary. But the best part of doing something like that was not necessarily knowing what skills it would take to get there. Applying everything that you've used to get to the point you're at currently and instill that trust that you can get there, but then being open to learning new things to figure out what you need to get to that next place. And that's really scary and really hard. And to your point, it is especially difficult if you don't trust the group that's leading the charge or overseeing you, or have that just the psychological safety to be able to say, yeah, I'm figuring out a new thing. So it's not going to be perfect at first, but we're moving the needle and we're getting closer. And that's really hard. I think there's people like you and me who just sort of push through and say, oh, I'm going to figure it out because that's how I keep myself engaged. but that's largely a unique population who wants to work in that sort of environment in general, versus your average employee. You're going to have to work really hard to get them to the point where they're comfortable with building the skill set as they go and telling you what they need to get there.
Yeah, and I think I reflected on my failures when I've been in leadership roles in companies is like that's actually been a huge problem and a huge oversight of mine, is that I have made these leaps from A to B, and I've gone on the journey inside my own head relatively quickly in comparison, and then expected everyone just to follow along because it's the right thing to do. And it's like, unfortunately, humans don't work like that. So yeah, when we're figuring out how to change the organizational design of these companies, you kind of got to figure that journey stuff out. And I don't think most are, because we're talking about theoretical concepts from books rather than practical application of what it means for employees. And me and Callie, if nothing else, care about employees implicitly, that why we're both on a mission to redesign the world of work and how we work with employees. Because if you don't, you're just not going to make any money as a company, to be completely honest, because we're moving into a vastly different world and it's going to be crucially important. Callie, thank you so much for joining me so last minute.
This was the best surprise of my day. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the rest of your Wednesday. And for the folks at home, I have not prepared because I should know what next week's live stream is. So I'm just going to click this link here and see what it is. Callie, any idea what it could be? What would you want?
I didn't know you had a new intro video, which I was going to compliment you on, by the way. So I apologize. I'm out of the loop here.
Yeah. So it's going. Oh, it's accessibility. Accessibility isn't an add-on. It's the key to unlocking true diversity. And we won't invite an American person back to talk about diversity because you don't do it anymore. And with that, not news-breaking bombshell, not breaking news bombshell, but a bombshell nonetheless. Callie, let's say goodbye. Bye.